The city of Varelia sparkled under three suns, its towers reaching high into the sky like giant crystals. The streets were alive with beings from hundreds of planets, each more unusual than the last. Scaled reptiles with eyes that glowed like molten metal, tall figures with multiple limbs moving gracefully, and beings that seemed to float rather than walk, all gathered in the capital's great arena. Today was a day the galaxy had waited for, the auction of Princess Celira of the Lorian Empire. She was unlike anyone else in the galaxy. Not only was she beautiful, with silver hair that shimmered like starlight and eyes that reflected entire worlds, but she was clever, sharp, and able to read the hearts of others. She had become the most desired being in the galaxy, not because of riches or power, but because of the way she carried herself. To be chosen by her meant not only status, but respect from every civilization in the stars. The arena itself was enormous. It floated above the city, supported by invisible energy fields, with walls that glowed like liquid light. Holographic displays showed the worth of each bidder, their wealth expressed in unimaginable numbers, fleets of starships, mountains of precious matter, and entire planetary colonies. Every seat in the arena was filled, and every bidder wore the look of someone who believed they would win. Among them, a human named Aiden Kyle moved quietly. He was simple in appearance, short hair, brown eyes, a lean build, and clothing that did not shine or float or glow like the others. Many aliens ignored him at first, assuming he had no place here. After all, humans were rare in the galaxy, and rarer still to see one standing among those who could purchase entire systems. Aiden had no interest in riches. He had traveled across space not to buy, but to see. He had heard of the Lorian princess's mind and her humor, her ability to challenge even the wisest of beings. He had heard how she could make the strongest generals laugh, the wealthiest merchants nervous, and the proudest emperors uncomfortable. He wanted nothing more than to meet her, to understand her, and perhaps to earn a smile. The auction began with a display of power and wealth. One bidder, a six-limbed trader from the planet Zorith, projected a holographic empire worth more than 10 neighboring systems. Another, a shimmering creature whose body was a liquid light, offered a planet made entirely of crystallized energy. The crowd gasped. Each offer more extravagant than the last. The numbers on the display were meaningless to most humans, but the aliens cheered, seeing their own worth in each rising figure. When it was Aiden's turn, he stepped forward calmly. The crowd quieted, curious to see what a human would do. He spoke simply, his voice clear and confident. I bid for her smile. Laughter erupted across the arena. Some aliens hissed or shook their heads. Pathetic, one said, its voice like grinding stone. A human thinks he can win her with words. Others whispered, mocking, he cannot compete with real wealth. He is nothing. Princess Celira sat on the stage, regal and poised, her silver hair falling like a cascade of light. She raised a delicate eyebrow, her eyes catching Aiden's gaze. There was no fear in him, no arrogance, just calm and genuine intent. That alone made her pause, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. As the auction continued, the human remained quiet, not raising a single number, not trying to impress with technology or alien treasures. Yet every time Celira looked at him, her curiosity grew. There was a softness in her eyes, a spark she did not feel for the other bidders. The aliens noticed too, but many could not understand why. What power could a simple human have when the universe offered empires and energy planets? Then, something subtle began to happen. Aiden leaned slightly toward the princess when she spoke to the audience, offering a quiet comment that made her laugh. It was a joke about human stubbornness, about their strange customs, about how a tiny planet like Earth could produce beings capable of thinking, building, and surviving against all odds. It was not a joke that needed money or technology. It was a joke that required understanding and courage. Celira laughed, softly at first, then openly, a sound that made even the richest aliens pause. Her eyes sparkled, and the smile on her face was unmistakable. She had smiled genuinely at someone for the first time in this arena. The crowd whispered, noticing the unusual display. Aliens who had commanded armies, ruled planets, or created entire fleets of starships began to feel a strange unease. Could it be possible that something other than wealth mattered? The auctioneer tried to keep control, calling out higher bids, reminding the bidders of the stakes, of the glory, of the treasure that awaited. The holograms shimmered with more and more riches, but the human did nothing more. He stood, silent and attentive, watching the princess with genuine interest. And still, she smiled at him. Some bidders grew desperate. A being with 7 arms offered a fleet of warships. A crystalline entity proposed to give her its entire home planet. Yet none of them could make Celira laugh or smile the way the human did. The laughter and small gestures, the quiet attentiveness, and the ability to listen and understand, these were things no fortune could buy. Aiden's calm presence began to inspire whispers among the audience. "Look at him," a reptilian merchant said to its companion. "He does nothing, yet she watches him more than any of us. Why?" "Perhaps wealth is not the only power," its companion replied, eyes narrowing. "Perhaps he has something we cannot measure." Meanwhile, the princess leaned slightly forward, observing the human more closely. Each word he spoke, each careful gesture, reminded her of stories she had read about Earth, about humans who were small, fragile, yet capable of astonishing courage and creativity. She remembered reading about their explorers, inventors, and leaders who had changed the course of history without massive resources, relying only on wit, persistence, and heart. As the auction progressed, Aiden began to speak softly to her in moments where the auctioneer allowed interaction. He told short stories about Earth's strange and wonderful cultures, about humans working together despite differences, and about how even ordinary humans could achieve the extraordinary. He spoke not to impress, but to share, and each story made Celira's smile grow wider. She leaned back slightly, trying to maintain composure. But the laughter and brightness in her eyes were unstoppable. By mid-afternoon, the spectacle of wealth had become secondary. Aliens were still bidding in the millions, flaunting treasures, but attention had shifted. Eyes turned toward the human who had offered no riches, only himself, his words, and his respect. His presence was a quiet defiance against the arrogance of power and wealth. Even the princess herself seemed to change. She had seen countless beings in her life, all trying to win her favor with grand gestures. And now here was a human who asked for nothing except her smile, and had won it without effort. She had not known she could feel such amusement and curiosity in the middle of an arena filled with riches and power. The crowd began to murmur about the human's unusual approach. "He is too simple," one alien said. "He cannot possibly win." Yet others began to wonder. "What if he already has?" whispered a traitor from a distant system. "What if she has smiled because of him and not anyone else?" Aiden did not notice the murmurs. He focused only on Celira, speaking honestly, laughing with her, listening to her thoughts. He did not try to impress or manipulate, only to connect. In a world where wealth ruled, his quiet human heart was an anomaly, and it was beginning to shine. As the first part of the auction drew to a close, the palace announcer declared a pause. Holographic bids froze in midair, leaving the audience to reflect. For the first time, the princess's attention had shifted entirely to one individual who did not offer a fortune, a fleet, or a planet. He had offered something far rarer: sincerity, courage, and a human smile in return for hers. Princess Salira's eyes met Aiden's across the arena. Her lips curved in an unrestrained smile, warm and genuine. No alien had ever achieved this. No amount of money or status could create it. In that brief moment, it became clear that the auction might not be won with wealth at all. The human who bid for her smile had achieved the impossible. He had captured the princess's attention, admiration, and amusement. And so, as the audience waited for the next round, the galaxy began to whisper a new idea. Perhaps humanity was more than fragile flesh and simple minds. Perhaps humans had a power no one had measured before, a power that could move hearts, inspire curiosity, and even outshine wealth and glory. The human simply stood, smiling back at her, ready for whatever would come next. The auction of wonders had begun, but already a single human had changed the rules of the game. The arena buzzed with anticipation as the second part of the auction began. Aliens adjusted their positions, some floating above the crowd, others shifting their many limbs in nervous energy. All eyes were on Princess Salira, but a quiet tension had settled over the assembly. The previous rounds had been about wealth and power, but now it was clear that something different was at play. A human, one of the smallest and least noticeable beings in the galaxy, had earned her smile, and that smile carried a weight no treasure could match. Aiden Kale stood among the bidders, calm and composed. He had spent the pause reflecting on the first part, thinking only about how to remain genuine. Unlike the others, he did not plan to impress with holographic planets or energy crystals. His currency was patience, understanding, and honesty, the very things that had drawn Salira's attention. The auctioneer's voice echoed through the arena, amplified by shimmering sound fields. "Final round," he announced. "All bidders, prepare your last offers. The princess shall choose the one who wins her favor." Holographic displays flared to life, showing the wealthiest bidders' final amounts. Entire star systems, floating palaces, and rare life forms were presented as potential gifts. The audience gasped and murmured, some in awe, others in envy. Aiden stepped forward. He raised no holograms, no treasure, no display of power. He simply walked toward the stage with calm determination. Around him, the other bidders scoffed. "This human thinks he can win by being human?" one growled, its voice like grinding stone. "He is weak, fragile, and meaningless in comparison to what we offer." But Salira's gaze lingered on him, curious and unguarded. She had seen courage in many forms, but the courage of honesty and simplicity was rare in the galaxy. She wondered what he would do next, and that curiosity sent a thrill through the crowd. The princess rose from her seat and addressed the bidders. "I will accept a winner based not on wealth or power, but on sincerity. The one who can make me smile with truth, wit, and courage shall be my choice." Her voice was firm, leaving no room for deception. Aliens murmured in disbelief. Some struggled to comprehend that their riches could be meaningless. Others laughed nervously, thinking the challenge trivial for someone who had amassed entire planetary systems. Aiden approached the center, where the princess waited. He bowed lightly, not out of submission, but in polite respect. "Princess Salira," he said, his voice steady, "I do not have riches. I do not have fleets or planets to offer. But I have stories of my people, and I have the hope that even a small human can make a difference in a vast universe. If you will allow me, I wish to share with you something simple, but true." Salira tilted her head, intrigued. She had heard humans were bold, but to speak so openly in front of the galaxy's elite was unusual. She nodded for him to continue. Aiden began with tales of Earth, its mountains, oceans, and deserts. He spoke of humans who faced impossible odds, explorers who crossed barren lands, scientists who uncovered secrets of the universe, and ordinary people who performed extraordinary acts of courage without recognition. He spoke of kindness, of laughter shared even in dark times, and of ingenuity that allowed a small species to survive against creatures far larger and stronger. The princess listened, her attention fixed entirely on him. There was no trickery, no attempt to impress. His words were simple, honest, and infused with quiet passion. The audience felt the shift. Even the wealthiest aliens leaned forward, curious, unable to ignore the calm power of his presence. Aiden paused for a moment and smiled, not arrogantly, but warmly. We humans do not always have the means to conquer or control, but we have hearts and we have minds. We can connect, care, and inspire. That is what I offer you, Princess. My honesty, my respect, and my admiration. For a heartbeat, the arena was silent. Then, Salira laughed. It was soft at first, like the ringing of crystal, but soon it filled the arena. Her silver hair shimmered under the three suns, and her eyes sparkled. This was no practiced smile, no ceremonial gesture. It was genuine, free, and bright. A human, standing in the middle of a room filled with unimaginable wealth, had made her laugh with honesty and courage. The other bidders faltered. Some tried to increase their bids, offering more riches, more power, more elaborate gifts. But the princess remained smiling at Aiden. She raised her hand, silencing the auctioneer. "Enough," she said, her voice steady. "No amount of wealth can match the sincerity and bravery of this human. He has won what none of you could buy: my attention, my laughter, and my respect." Gasps and murmurs spread through the arena. Aliens who had believed themselves untouchable looked at each other, unsure of what to do. They had assumed the galaxy could be conquered with power and credit. But they were reminded that true influence sometimes came from unexpected sources. Salira descended from the stage and approached Aiden. She looked into his eyes and spoke softly. "You did not try to impress me. You did not try to show me power. You simply shared truth and honesty. That is something rare in this galaxy, and it is something I value." Aiden bowed slightly. "I did what I could, Princess. I only hope to share a moment of genuine connection." She smiled again, the kind that warmed more than it dazzled. And that moment is worth more than entire empires. Today, you have reminded me, and perhaps all of us, that wealth and power are not the only ways to measure worth. The crowd erupted, some in awe, others in reluctant admiration. Whispers spread across the arena. The human won, not with riches, but with his heart. He is small, but his courage is immense. Perhaps humanity is more than fragile flesh. They have something no one else can claim. Aiden and Salira spent the rest of the day together, not as rulers or possessions, but as two beings who had found mutual respect. He learned about her responsibilities, her dreams, and the wisdom she had gained ruling the Lorian Empire. She listened to his stories of Earth, of humanity's struggles and triumphs, and she laughed and nodded with delight. In the days that followed, the story of the auction spread across the galaxy. Humans, who had often been underestimated, were now celebrated not for power or wealth, but for courage, wit, and authenticity. Children on distant worlds told stories of a human who won a princess's smile where fleets and empires had failed. Scholars debated the lesson. True influence did not always come from what one could take or buy, but from what one could give: honesty, understanding, and respect. Princess Salira, meanwhile, continued to rule her empire with wisdom, now reminded that true leadership required recognizing value beyond numbers and possessions. She often recounted the moment the human had made her smile, a memory she cherished more than any treasure or title. Aiden returned to Earth months later, his journey across the galaxy having changed him as much as it had changed those who witnessed it. He carried no treasure from the auction, no starships or crystals, but he had something far greater. The understanding that humanity, with its courage, heart, and spirit, could leave a mark on the universe that no wealth could ever match. Across the galaxy, whispers of humans' bravery and ingenuity spread. They became known not as a weak species, but as beings capable of remarkable subtlety, unexpected influence, and the courage to stand firm with nothing but honesty and heart. And it all began with one human bidding, not for fortune or power, but for a single, genuine smile. In time, the auction became legendary. It was remembered not for the wealth displayed, nor for the empires offered, but for the lesson it taught, that the smallest beings armed with courage, sincerity, and heart could achieve what even the wealthiest could not. And in that lesson, humanity was no longer underestimated. They were celebrated, respected, and admired, a species whose greatest strength was its soul. The galaxy, in all its vastness, had learned something new. Sometimes the simplest, smallest gestures carry the greatest power. And for Princess Salira, the human who had made her smile remained unforgettable, a reminder that true connection cannot be bought, but only earned.